Welcome back, everybody, to DissedMedia, a startup story, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up. And, for many of our guests that we have, they have a variety of backgrounds. There's things that they help entrepreneurs with. We've talked to venture capital people. We've talked to leadership-focused people. Today, we're really going to be diving into the entrepreneur side of things. And I have with us today somebody who has worked in the entrepreneur space for quite a while, not just in starting their own business, but in helping others get into being entrepreneurs, helping others kind of launch their own kind of independence, working for themselves, and really kind of build from there. We have with us Dr. Tom DuFore. Tom has built Big Sky franchise team, and their focus is to help people either franchise a business that they own, become a franchisee, or Tom, you've also helped supply franchisees and franchisors as well. And we're going to get into all of that. But Tom, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. So as I was reading through your background and your bio, you've been in this franchise space for quite a bit. I would say you probably built your career around it. Help me understand, where did this start from? How did you get involved in this type of work?
Well, that's a great question. And people in franchising, and I consider myself at this juncture a lifer in franchising, all have kind of this genesis story, because most people in franchising don't set out to get into franchising. It's just something that I kind of stumbled upon, like many, and just fell in love with the idea of it. And my first venture into franchising was right after I finished undergrad. And I was a business management major, and I knew that I wanted to get into management consulting. That was a direction and a career path that I was pursuing. And the first opportunity I had happened to be at a franchise consulting company where they help entrepreneurs and small to mid-sized business owners, turn their company into a franchise so that they can go and take it and sell it to someone else. And so that was my first opportunity in there, and really fell in love with the idea. Married two things that I feel very strongly on. One is I love the idea of entrepreneurship, and two is the American dream. And entrepreneurship is certainly pursuing and going after that American dream. And so it was helping existing entrepreneurs grow their business and expand what they've done, all the while by helping budding entrepreneurs and these incoming franchisees create their own version of the American dream through buying a franchise as an owner of a franchise. And so that's where my journey began and how I came into franchising. And once I got that franchise bug, I really haven't left. So that's where it all started.
So when you think about, because there's a couple different angles here. There are those who want to be a business owner, and stepping into a franchise model, I think, is a good way of doing that, because I hate to say it's turnkey, because I don't think really anything is totally turnkey. There's still a lot of work you got to put into it, but it's a good way of becoming a business owner if you're absent maybe a good product or service of your own. And so it allows you to kind of step into that. But if you're somebody who owns a business, I think often when we think of franchising, we think of restaurants, but there's a lot of different types of franchises out there. But for those who are kind of thinking of becoming franchisees, how do you help with that journey?
So on the franchisee journey, that's a piece of my career where I have spent most of my time working specifically with that entrepreneur to grow and working with franchisors. Now, on working with the franchisee, I've worked on, there are two, it's called a franchise broker. There are two sides of a franchise broker in the franchise broker world. And it's very similar to real estate. There's typically a seller side representative and a buyer side representative. And I generally work with the seller. So I work typically with the franchisor and helping them find candidates to find through marketing, helping them screen these candidates as they come through the process to make sure they're the right fit. So it's kind of like a real estate agent. When you're looking to sell your home, you want that real estate agent to be representing your property and helping you through that process. And that's the angle that I have. That's the area that I've spent time in. I have many great counterparts and people in the franchise brokerage world that represent the franchise buyer for the buyer representation, where in that instance, they're helping this franchise buyer actually sort through and find the right opportunity for them and figuring out what's their budget and what kind of lifestyle do they want to live, and is there an income that they're trying to get to, and how can franchising do that in a wide variety of options that become available.
So your team works more on with the franchise or
Yes. Yeah.
and ultimately kind of building out and scaling their business. So to date, you've helped, well over 600 businesses at this point, become bigger, increase their footprint. When you think about that work that it takes to do that, if you're a business owner, you're thinking about franchising, what are some of the things that you usually start with when you're going down that path?
Yeah. So the first thing that we always like to start with is really an understanding of franchise viability. Is your business in a position that it makes sense to franchise? And then if we establish that, then it comes down to the owner or the owners, maybe some partners involved, and saying, do you really want to venture into franchising and taking this on? It is a new business that you're stepping into. And so when we take a look at franchising a business, and is your business, quote, franchisable? It's kind of a made up word that we use in the franchise world, but essentially, is it viable? And we use 3 big check boxes to say, well, does my business even qualify? Would it make sense for me to even consider pursuing this? And the first big box we like to check in franchising is, do you have a profitable prototype? And I know that kind of seems silly to even make that a statement, but it's an important qualifier to say, do you have a profitable prototype? And for businesses that check that box, and when I say profitable, oftentimes owners and entrepreneurs will say, well, Tom, my tax return says, I only made so much money, or it shows that I'm not profitable. I'm not talking about what your tax return says after you have deductions and all of these other things. It's really your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, or also known as your cash flow out of the business before you take owner benefit out. So that's how I generally like to look at it. And so we want to make sure that it's profitable and that you have that running. That makes sense. Number 2 then is, do you have customers or a potential customer base on a national basis? And that doesn't mean you have customers if you own a local painting company, just as an example. That doesn't mean someone, if you're based in Florida and someone's probably not hiring you in the state of Washington to come paint their home or paint their business. Okay. But we're saying that there are prospective customers or prospective clients in these other markets. And we sometimes there are businesses that are hyper local that really cater to a very local audience. And there's some just local flavor there that ends up being popular. But for most, we want a national audience, at minimum a regional. And the reason we want a minimum is because if you're going to franchise, you want there to be enough opportunities to sell enough franchise territories that it's worthwhile, that the time and money you invest into franchising, that you're able to see a return. And the ideal situation is that you have an international customer base. Why not? So that's checkbox 2. And then checkbox number 3 is the ability to teach someone how to run the business. And it's thinking of this. Sometimes people say, well, how would I train an owner, or how would I do that? And the best way to think of it is, think of your business and running your company, and how you would train a general manager to run the entire operation, and for you to then go and take a vacation for 4 months or for 4 weeks or a few months to Australia or New Zealand, some place on the other side of the world where you're different time zones and someone else is running the general day-to-day business with little check-in. And so if you have the ability to do that and teach someone, and for example, sometimes there are very technical businesses where you actually do need technical background. We have clients that are veterinarian clinics that have franchised. Well, in most instances, you have to be a veterinarian to own that. Well, we're not teaching people how to be veterinarians. You're teaching the veterinarian how to run that business. And so those are the three big check boxes. So if you check all three of those, chances are that the business is franchisable. But then that gets to the second question we mentioned, which is, do you want to franchise? If you check the box, say, yes, it checks the boxes. I think, okay, I'm franchisable. Well, then you have to really start digging into it. Do you really want to go down this path? What's involved? And that's where having a conversation with someone like myself to help give you a better sense of what a day in the life looks like, what the initial push into franchising looks like, and all of the time, effort, and energy that needs to go into that to help you sort through all of that. And one of the things we help our clients with and offer up is essentially a feasibility study that we offer, that they can, if they're not ready to jump in, but they need a little bit more than kind of a 3-point checklist. We've got a more detailed feasibility study that will help guide them through.
So, out of curiosity, given the breadth of businesses that you have franchised, how do they kind of break out, like restaurant versus services versus, gosh, I mean, it's interesting. Like Ashley Furniture is a franchise, and I used to work with Coca-Cola. I always tell people, like, Coca-Cola is a franchise. Like, they have a franchised bottling network that distributes their product. So, I mean, you can franchise a lot of different things. How with your organization, what is that? What are the different industries that you're serving currently?
Well, that's a great question and a great point, that most of franchising today is a service-related franchise. That's the number one category. Actually, home services has been the number one category for franchise inquiries over the last, coming up on 5.5, almost 6 years now. And I actually, as of this recording, was at a regional franchise meetup, and the International Franchise Association president came to the session and shared some just statistics and data. And one of the data points is that as of today, food establishments, while we know that food and beverage and restaurants, we see them on the street corners. In fact, we're probably customers of them every week or every month. I know I am.
Yeah.
And so I was today for lunch at a local franchise sandwich shop. And anyway, but less than 25% of all franchises are actually food operations. And so I think that's an interesting thing. So most people, when they think of franchise, you think of food, you think of hotel and lodging as these big categories, and they are. And part of it is just, as a consumer, we see them often and we're regular customers of them. But these, in our own business, we have things from manufacturers to home services, professional service offerings. And professional services is one that you might not think of quite as much, such as marketing agencies or accounting or bookkeeping services. There are plenty that end up franchising in these professional type services. There are certainly, we have food clients and restaurant clients, but we have lots of mobile oriented clients. I have a client in the mobile, of all things, a luxury mobile porta potty business. There are
Interesting.
things that you might not ever really think about, but really any business that anyone that's looking to grow and essentially use other people's time, money, and resources to help them expand, franchising checks that box for them.
So when you think about some of the breadth of businesses that you've worked with, even if it hasn't necessarily come from your organization, even if there's others that are out there, what's the most unique business you've seen that has become a franchise?
One that I found extremely unique and very interesting is a business that uh, collected would collect used oil, fry oil from restaurants, then they collect it, takes it to a refinery that they build, refine the oil, and turn it into usable product that they resell onto the market in a variety of forms. And that was one to me that was pretty amazing to think it's really essentially an oil recycling franchise. And so I found that to be so interesting. And the value add is it would give the restaurant owner or restaurant business a way to sell the used oil. Then they take that oil, recycle it, clean it. I don't know the technical pieces of how they make it all work, but they do. And then figure out a way to repurpose it and now sell it on the market as a usable product. That for me was one that was really, really amazing. And I found extremely interesting in what they do. And certainly, I love concepts like you mentioned Coca-Cola and your background there. Coca-Cola, 7-Up, Dr. Pepper, all these brands, it started as they had to franchise their bottling centers, and many still are today, as you point
Yeah.
out. And many people don't realize that franchising really started as a distribution method for manufacturers. We're most familiar with it in today's world as what we call business format franchising, where we're franchising a business format, but manufacturers were using it first. The car dealers, essentially before the franchise word really existed and was used, essentially is that type of a model where manufacturers are increasing distribution with a local owner buying product and then building a customer base independently so it doesn't fall on that manufacturer.
Yeah, creating that dealer network, if you will.
Yes, that's right.
What do you see in the industry right now that is kind of either trending or emerging trends that are happening in the franchise world?
What I'm seeing are two main trends that I'm seeing in franchise. First is this has been a trend really since COVID hit, and it's a home focus on some form of a home-based services related business of all kinds. Exterior services, interior services, from landscaping and pressure washing to painting, mosquito, any kind of home services. And just frankly, in general, the American culture is very much, we prefer a do it for me kind of a service or a do it for you kind of a service versus a do it yourself kind of a service. So these services are flourishing in a large part because of that demand. And in those industries, there's been a lack of professionalism. So franchises provide a certain level of professionalism and expectation in there. And I owned a home services franchise. I was a multi-unit franchisee in a home services brand. I was a semi-absentee owner, but that was a great experience. That might have been my best learning lessons, was as a multi-unit franchisee running multiple territories and paying my royalties and growing the business. And one thing that is 100% for certain, that was my business, growing that. And so that was a fun time to go through that and grow that business for about 6 or 7 years before I ended up selling it. And then the other trend I'm seeing is mobile businesses of all kinds. So everything from food trucks and food trailers to all different kinds. I mentioned the mobile porta potty business, just the idea of mobile oriented products. So going to the customer or being able to bring whatever the service or product that's being sold to the customer, to the event, to the location of where people are gathering. So that's the other big thing I'm seeing. People are getting together in a pretty high demand. People want to be together, but it's in a different way. It's not just let's go to a restaurant and meet up. There are unique opportunities that people are creating, even for family events on up to corporate events. So that's a big trend that I'm really starting to see emerge over the last, call it 2 years or so, and seeing that trend continue.
So on the flip side of that, what are some things that don't seem to be getting traction as much as they used to?
A good reference point that comes up often are certainly frozen yogurt and the froyo craze that come and
Yeah.
go, and just frozen confections. And there seem to be these cycles with froyo or frozen confections and ice cream brands that kind of, there's a surge, and then it rises, and then it falls a little, and then it's not that it falls, all crashes, it just kind of falls and then levels out. That's how I typically see these happen. So those are trends that I tend to see. But as one trend kind of falls off in some of these categories, there's some new hot idea that starts coming out with, right now, some of these, I don't know how to describe them, these businesses that do milkshakes, but they are like milkshakes to the next level, with all the fixins in it. It's got all the extras, and it's an over the top kind of a milkshake that they are building out. And so starting to see traction in that. And so it's really driven by consumer trends for some of those.
It's interesting that you say that, because during COVID, Crumble was one of those businesses that just kind of blew up due to social media. And the whole idea of, different cookies each week, and you had to see what was coming out. And then, that kind of drove traffic, and that business just blew up. And then it's seemingly just as quickly as they've blown up, they're starting to recede and kind of reposition a little bit, because I don't know, maybe it just scaled up too quickly. And it's interesting that, social media has kind of added this new layer to either, you're going to burn white hot, or, as soon as that cools, can have quite an effect on your business. When you think about the stuff like that, and I know because you're highly active in the world of franchising, you're connected with a couple different industries that kind of focus on this as a whole. Has this come up at all? Like, how do you protect your franchise business from becoming a social trend? And I know that sounds terrible. Like, why would you want to protect from being a social trend? But the downsides of that is like you can flame out.
Yeah, well, I think using Crumble as an example, that when you rise and reach a certain success, it's easy to either turn them into a villain, or use them as or even use them as a role model to try to emulate. Right? It's like kind of these polar opposites at times. But as you start to expand, part of the job of the franchisor, every franchisor has three main jobs when you really break it down. They have to sell new franchises, number one. They have to train those franchisees, and then they have to support them. And really, you're creating a coaching business at the end of the day. Coaching has been a very popular trend. Speaking of trends, it has been a very popular trend of, hey, become a coach, become a coach, become a coach. Well, when you franchise your business and become a franchisor, you're really becoming a coach with an asset in the intellectual property that's been created. And so, like any good coach ought to do, and any franchisor ought to do, is help coach their franchisees, in this case, on how to stay relevant in the market. So part of that includes new product creation, pivoting or creating or adjusting to current market demand and current market trends, and helping your franchisees keep their business afloat. And the thing of it is, though, that like any coach, you can't do it for the person or company you're coaching. The actual protege or the person has to go and do the work. So the coach can help guide them, but they can't do it for them. It's similar to a personal trainer as an example. And so when I think of protecting this as an asset, the franchisor wants to maintain, keep units open, because in franchising, when units close, or any business, units close, that's a bad thing. It looks negative. It creates this negative piece. Sometimes franchise systems overgrow, they grow too quickly, they outgrow their systems, it creates a problem. And then there's a lot of cleanup that has to happen, and it's just messy and problematic, and it's not good for anyone that's involved, and especially the franchisees that buy in. So we generally recommend you want to try and grow with your ability to support those franchisees as they come into your system. So to help protect them, I think of current trends for other old brands right now that have been around a long time. Companies like a McDonald's, for example, and has been getting a lot of flack in the media and by consumers for being too expensive. That's kind of been part of the rub that customers have been saying. It's like, hey, I expect McDonald's to be fast and cheap. That's kind of part of the deal. It's like, the quality's okay, but it's supposed to be fast and cheap is kind of part of the deal. So it's been fast, but it hasn't been very cheap for a lot of consumers. And so I actually just wrote an article for a franchise publication called The Franchise Wire about the 12 trends in franchising for 2026. And one of the trends I see is this idea of creating greater value for consumers. So bundling things together, creating value meals. And anyone who's watched any football or live sporting events, the advertisements have been full specifically of McDonald's bundling things, saying, by the way, the value meal's back. You can get a great deal with us. And McDonald's actually in terms of providing support, has recently changed for this year. They've changed their field support or franchise field support evaluation of franchising. Part of the criteria this year now includes value to the customer, what kind of value is being created through the product offerings and pricing that's being offered. So I think that's an interesting thing that we're seeing.
I think that really seems to be kind of the national tone. Really, it's affordability, value, kind of bringing prices back into scope, because I think most consumers have really been hit over the last couple of years. Price increases in a lot of different fashions, and so kind of bringing that value back. Something about disrupting our supply chain has a lot to do with some of the reasons why prices would rise. But now that things are more online, and we're getting some stability, it's good to see that that's kind of a theme out there. Tom, one of the things I was curious about is, as somebody who's active on LinkedIn and things like that, I get pitched all the time. As a matter of fact, it's funny. So, I did not come up with this term, but I love this term. When somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and then tries to immediately sell you something, that's called pitch slapping.
Oh, that is new to me. I did not know it had a name, but I know what that is. That makes sense.
Which I love the name. I love the name, but I cannot take credit for it. But anyway, the reason I talk about that is there are people out there who pretty aggressively kind of go after people, pitching them, trying to lure them into either franchising, or if you own a business, maybe getting into this model. So I imagine that there are some great ways of doing this, and then some things that you as a business owner, you might want to watch out for and be cautious of when people come courting you, selling you on a dream of becoming the next Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever, right? So in your experience and in your years of doing this work, what are some things that you've seen that can be, flags that we should pay attention to?
So I want to make sure, just to clarify, are you saying when someone's reaching out, or just to be careful when franchising, to be thinking about if you're going to get into franchising?
Yeah, like a little bit of both, because if you're interested in franchising, what are some things, if you've never done this before and you're putting feelers out and you've got people courting you, I imagine that there's a reputable way of going through this process. And then there are some people who they're gonna blow you up, and they've got a lot of big ideas, but maybe they have not the best execution, not the best follow through. What are some of those things as a business owner that you really want to kind of have your ears up and listening for
Yeah.
when you go in this direction.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification. So, yeah, so this comes up often, and one of the things I've taken a look at and put together, we put together a white paper years ago called 9 Pitfalls to Avoid When Franchising Your Business. And what I put this together really by looking backwards to say, of all the people I've spoken to, I've been doing this now since 2003. I've personally consulted with, at this point, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs and leaders around the country, around the world, that have inquired or expressed interest in, and we have conversations about franchising. And these are the most common things that I saw come up for people that when they start getting into franchise or start thinking about it, just to be aware of. So I'll run through some of these pretty quickly here, but just to get us the conversation started. So one of them is get rich quick thinking. And so I always caution people, if you're thinking about getting into franchising, or someone's trying to sell you their services, it's promising, hey, you can get rich quick by franchising your business, I would be extremely cautious in that kind of an engagement. And if you're thinking about getting into franchising to try to be the exception, meaning there are only so many versions of Crumble that happen in a given year, right? Or the next hot franchise that comes along. There are only a few, and those get the headlines, and that's what most people think of. However, on average, in a study I've done and research I've looked up, it shows that on average across all franchise systems, they sell about 9 franchises a year, from the very well-established and mature franchises to brand new ones. And so the idea of get rich quick thinking, just be very cautious. If that's your mindset, I would suggest look at another way than franchising. Another one is that comes up often is in these situations is doing everything yourself. A lot of times entrepreneurs come in and they think, oh, well, I figured out my business. I can figure out franchising, and just kind of make some mistakes and, smooth them out over time and work out the wrinkles. And I just caution that in franchising, it's not just your livelihood that you're playing with, it's franchisees' livelihood. So you want to seek and find experts, people that can help you along the way. And is it a little bit of a shameless plug for us? I guess, in the kinds of services my firm offers, but whether it's us or there are lots of really quality, experienced professionals in the space that are available to help support. I would say, if someone is contacted and someone's asking for equity in their franchise system right away on the onset, I just say offer that to be very, very cautious. Your franchise system at the beginning is worth the least it's ever going to be worth. It's worth the least. And so giving up equity now, there's really not a lot of value add for what most offers I see. Essentially, someone's really trying to be a shark in those instances to kind of steal equity in the business or sneak it into contracts. So if you see anything like that, it might be the right circumstance for that person at that moment, but I just always recommend taking a pause and showing caution there. The other thing I see is that becomes an issue for many is the implication that franchise sales is easy, or all you have to do is franchise and you're going to sell 100 franchises quickly, and it's easy. And if it were easy, everyone would have 100 plus franchises.
Right.
But they don't. And every business owner would do it, and they don't. And it's just kind of like thinking, well, whatever business you're in, whatever industry you're in, when someone listens into this, if it were easy to do, everyone would have a successful business in this, because it would be easy to make. And I think so. I just think that is misguided. It's misguiding. And so one of the things we always like to look at is say, well, are they more interested in just getting a project or some equity, or trying to get a quick sale and then move on, or in guiding and supporting you along the way? What are their, where where's their heart in this situation? So sometimes it's hard to tell and discern that. But to me, if someone's getting pressured into franchising or kind of force closed or strong armed into it, I'd be really cautious in having conversations with someone like that.
As you grow the number of locations you have, you then have to either split your time across all of those new instances, because anytime you bring somebody new into it, you got to train them up, you got to get them to deliver to the same standard that you do, which means that if you don't have a good team trained, if you don't have a good team of resources behind you that can help provide support, replicate the branding, replicate the service structure, the kind of nobody is going to care about it the same way that you do, because you're kind of the first one. It's your love, it's your passion. But that doesn't mean that you can't create, standards for everybody to kind of work up towards. Do you find that that is sometimes the hardest thing, is as you scale, maintaining that support and that quality that you initially established to create the brand and the business in the first place?
Yes, that can be challenging. But there are things you can do to help mitigate or reduce that from occurring. The first is in franchising, just choosing the right franchisees to join your system. So making sure you're selecting the right franchisees early on, identifying, franchise sales. This is not a hunt for suckers. Okay. We're not just looking for some sap to sell a franchise to and move them in. And what we want to make sure that we're really trying to find people that we think are going to be a cultural fit in the business. So cultural fit is important. Just like when hiring new staff or new employees, the difference is in franchising, you're now signing these long-term contracts as part of the process. So a typical franchise agreement is going to be 10 years. Well, what do they say? The 7-year itch in marriage, it's like 7 years for getting married to someone. Well, think about that from a franchise standpoint. You're kind of getting married to this person when they're coming into your system. So doing your due diligence and research and the best you can, of course, as you go through this, that's going to be an important first step to make sure. The second then is providing that ongoing, then it's the training and the support. So making sure you're training. When in doubt, I had a conversation with a client earlier today about this, and he said, for someone that does not have experience in my industry, they're going to have to be with me for 8 weeks before they'd be able to go out and have a real chance of finding success in this. So they really need to work with our team for 8 weeks before they'd be able to do it. Someone with experience might be able to do less, maybe 4 weeks or 3 weeks, but someone with no experience is going to need a few weeks. So making sure that training set up, and then that ongoing support. So so often the old adage is, you get the results, you get what you tolerate for the results. And so if you tolerate franchisees that are going off the beaten path and doing things that do kind of creating their own magic recipes or whatever's happening, well, that's going to be problematic for the brand versus having regular coaching calls with them. And as the franchise starts launching, that should be every month. You should be having at minimum a financial review of a P&L and reviewing how they're spending marketing, how their online reputation with how many Google reviews do they have, or Yelp reviews, or whatever's going on. Is it going up? Is it going down? Are they having employee issues? Whatever's going on, just to help provide that coaching to them to help keep them on a more narrow path. And at the end of the day, the real value goes back to the customer, because the value of a franchise is when a customer goes into, whether it's a McDonald's or a Jersey Mike's or a painting franchise, that the experience from one location to the next no matter where it's located around the country, is going to be very, very similar. And that's the value of franchising, with one great caveat, which is it's locally owned and in many cases locally operated. And that for me is the real secret sauce of franchising, is you get a proven method to execute for that franchisee. And then for the customer, you get to still have that local owner that's right there. And my wife's active in the PTO, local school PTOs and PTAs, and they work with different franchise organizations often through there. And it's most often the local franchisee that's up at 6 a.m. delivering breakfast for teachers, or, coming to some event or after hours. It's not their employees, it's the local owner that's showing up. And so I think that's some real value there. So to help protect that brand and quality, it's really keeping a good line of communication both ways, because franchisees are going to tell you when stuff's not working. So you want to keep a 2-lane road of communication in line, and having those regular check-ins.
So thinking about, and you've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of different businesses. And this is my Sophie's Choice question I have for you. When you think about all of the ones that you had, what were one or a few that you really, you step back and you're like, I did that?
Well, there are a few that have been around long enough that were really cool and interesting to be a part of. One is, and this was way back at the first part of my career. I was a junior consultant at the time, so it's not like it was one that I was active on, but it's just one I remember being in on some of the early meetings. And it was the Marco's Pizza family that franchised. Oh, nice. And I remember being in on those meetings, and it just, kind of like any other client project, they've got a great business, it's going well. And you just had no idea that all of a sudden they were going to become a major player in what many believe to be a saturated space. And who knew there'd be room for another, right? That would come along and grow. And now the next one's coming behind it. So that's one that's always really fun and interesting to share and talk about. I always find that one just interesting, just because of how large they've become over the years.
It's funny. I talk about this all the time when I teach. If you think about the number of pizza locations there are, or hamburger restaurants that there are, or even, Asian food restaurants, right? And, someone could look at that landscape and say, there's so much out there. How am I going to, cut through, be different, etc.? Yet every year, look at Shake Shack. Boy, talk about a contactless, experience. I mean, most Shake Shacks, you order on a terminal, you don't see someone until they bring you your food, and then you don't see them again. But you've got Shake Shack, you've got Panda Express, which is, just continues to grow, and pizza. The number of locations that continue to grow. And now we're seeing it even with coffee shops, right? So Starbucks was kind of the leader, but now we're getting a lot of regional, local places that are really, creating competition for that model. And even, In-N-Out Burger, which nobody ever thought would leave the West Coast. Now, granted, those are all, I believe they're all 100% company owned. But, the reality is that regardless of how saturated you think a market is, there is always room. It's not a fixed pie. Like there is always an opportunity there for someone to do it with a little bit more finesse, to add something that's nobody else is doing and capitalize on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, for at least the foreseeable future, the population continues to increase. So At the end of the day, as long as that population keeps increasing, I mean, the demand is going to keep increasing as well, just for sheer volume, sheer numbers. And I'm a big believer in what you just said. I've seen it too many times over and over and over again. And these industries that people just assume to be saturated, that there's no way there can be another burger restaurant. And you mentioned the Shake Shack. Well, before that, then came Five Guys. And before Five Guys, it's like, how is there room for that many more burger joints? It's burgers and fries. It's about as basic as it comes. And yet there's still McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and now Five Guys. And, the next one, the In-N-Out burgers, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so I don't have a great answer for it, but to your point, if you can differentiate and find a market that's growing, the chances are it'll work if you stick with it.
As we think about the evolutions that are happening now with AI, with crypto, have you seen any franchise opportunities that are kind of heading down that tech route, either in the AI scape or the crypto scape or anything like that?
I would say I'm not seeing a lot of what I'm seeing in franchising for AI adoption has mostly been on the marketing and sales end in using it in that capacity. And then operational automation to help automate some just mindless tasks to make things go a little faster, a little quicker in the process. So I'm not seeing that yet. However, it's been coming up for a long time of these restaurants with kitchens that are fully autonomous, that operate without people in them. And, the equipment keeps getting better. The machines keep getting better. So, I don't know how close, 15 years ago, I remember people saying that trend it's on its way, and it's 15 years have passed now, and it's still not here yet, at least on a widespread scale. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm not seeing it much more than right now outside of this marketing and sales activity, and then automating some operational functions for the franchise systems.
You mentioned the machinery getting better. Something I'm seeing pop up more are these cotton candy vending machines, right? That spin up, cotton candy or soft serve ice cream, or any kind of like robotic, service treat kind of machinery. Those things are popping up, as well as tends to be kind of a big trend. It kind of started in Asia. Japan is known for just having all kinds of machinery and stuff, but stores I see popping up that are all just coin operated machines that dispense trinkets and knickknacks and all kinds of stuff. But like, there's a big push, seeing that and younger people are just going nuts for it, right? So I imagine before long we're going to have people who say, hey, we'll show you how to run your own coin operated pop-up store that has all of these machines and trinkets and stuff that people clamor for. So Tom, as we think about kind of winding down here, something I did want to mention, because you have a podcast of your own called Multiply Your Success, which is something that you do really regularly. Tell me a little bit about the show. What are some of the things that you guys cover there?
Yeah, so our show, we're coming up on episode, as of this recording, coming up on episode 300. And
nice.
And it's every week. It drops every week. Have yet to miss one, knock on wood. It is a labor of love at times. And no, but our topic is, we try to bring on guests that have some expertise or background in, whether it be growing businesses, whether it be helping with marketing solution. It tries to be very practical. So they might have an expertise. We want to get practical. Say, okay, well, what could someone who runs a business do today or tomorrow, and kind of helping with that. And then we close every show and we ask every guest 4 questions. We ask them if they had a miss on their journey, to share a make, to share a multiplier that they've made. And then we ask every guest, what does success mean to you? And that was really a driver for me for creating the show. Was I had this hunch that, having worked with so many entrepreneurs and successful leaders over the years, that I think there's a connotation that most people think success is all about money and how much money you make. And my hunch was that I think for most people that's the surface level thing that you think about, but it's not really that. And in almost 300 episodes, I've asked every guest the same question. And I think there have been 5 people or fewer that have said money was success to them. It's always been something other than that. It's maybe been time with their family. It's been relationships. It's been the freedom of choice. It's been lots of different things that money was not the primary driver. So I found that very, very interesting. So that was one of my driver, and I just love learning. So I love interviewing and learning from others.
That's one of the reasons we love doing it. When we got started, one of the things I left out when I was telling you about how DissedMedia got started. So this podcast started because it was going to be a chronicle of our success or our failure, but we were going to give everybody the opportunity to take that ride along with us. And more recently, we're now getting into kind of guest speaking, but we continue to give updates on the business. The fact that we're still around, we haven't crashed and burned yet, but I think it's kind of fun to bring people along that journey from the very beginning of, we hadn't formed a company, didn't have a website, like none of that stuff. So, it's a lot of fun. So Tom, how do people find you? Where do they reach out to connect with your team? If you've got a business, if you want to have a conversation about franchising and thinking about getting into this space, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best place to go is just to our company website. It's Big Sky Franchise Team, and you can go to bigskyfranchise.com and pull that up. We have a free consultation we offer, no obligation, no cost, and a wealth of free resources. I mentioned our podcast. We have an educational webinar series. We have a free franchise quiz on the website, just lots of things. So if you're just exploring, this is a great place to start. If you want to have a conversation with me or one of our consultants, we'd be happy to schedule some time and talk about your business and help you sort through this. For most people, this is a long journey. This is not something you wake up and just decide to do tomorrow. Most successful leaders and owners that I've worked with, they start thinking about this and it noodles around for maybe a year or 2 or 3. And so we want to be a part of that journey and help you through that. And then if you want to connect with me personally, I'm similar to you. I'm active on LinkedIn. So you can just look me up there find me at Tom DuFore. And I don't know if I'm the only one, but there aren't many of us. So you'll find me out there and would love to connect.
Awesome. Yeah, if you go down this route of franchising your business, I mean, not only is it a bit of a business pivot, but it truly is like, a lifelong commitment to this different phase of running your business. But seems like it can be one that is very rewarding as well.
Yeah, yes, very much so. Yeah, for someone that's thinking of, I always say, if you want to grow and expand your business and you're an independent business of some kind, you need to consider franchising. Should you franchise? No, not necessarily, but it's one you need to rule it out or rule it in and decide if that's the direction you want to go. And franchising gives you an opportunity to serve more customers in more markets that you otherwise would never be able to get into. And one great example I have is a client I worked with up in New Hampshire a few years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, and he sold 1 or 2 franchises a year. And I think about how many businesses have started and operated for, call it 10 years. And, they still have the one that they had 10 years ago or when they started 20 years ago. And he decided to franchise and he sold 1 or 2 a year. And guess what? He's got 14 franchises and he's just sold 1 or 2 to longtime customers or friends or family or people who've just kind of inquired slowly over time. It's just kind of been more of a natural rhythm to his expansion. And so I always think that's one of my favorite success stories because that's not making the headlines, that newspaper articles are not getting written up about what he's doing. But to me, that's such a tremendous success story for the vast majority of small business owners. If you could have 10, 15, 20 more of whatever it is, that's exciting to me.
And just a very humble, small, not growth for growth's sake, but just delivering on the business every day.
Yep.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for your time. For those out there who continue to follow the Daily Pitch, and thank you guys for your continued support. Our YouTube goal this year, 100,000 subs by the end of the year. We are, as of this recording, just breaking 6,000. So awesome to see that. And by the way, folks, this is new to this podcast. We'll probably be running this some promos around this by the time that this episode does drop. But I've got a brand new book out that is my first and one that I am going to be promoting feverishly, which is called 10 Topics to Help Managers, Leaders, and Entrepreneurs Get Better at What They Do. If you guys want to check that out, feel free to hit up any of our socials. You'll be able to find it on our website, at the Daily Pitch, at DissedMedia, all of the normal places that we mentioned. But everybody, thank you all for checking out this episode. Thank you all for coming along. Like, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things. And we'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to DissedMedia, A Startup Story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of DissedMedia Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@dissedmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes or information about our guests by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.